Alright, welcome back to the top 3 successor chapter. What the hell? Welcome back to the top 3 successor chapter videos. Today we're going to be doing the final 3. Um, Sources for most of these are either I heard it in a YouTube video or the 40k wiki. Mostly 40k wiki, but without further ado, let's get into the video. So first off is going to be the Dark Angels, and the Dark Angels are another chapter with little variation in creativity, similar to the Space Wolves. And but this is at least dampened by the fact that they have at least a versatile aesthetic. However, even the Dark Angels have some exceptions to that rule, such as the Angels of Absolution. The Angels of Absolution differ from the rest of their second founding kin by the belief that they have already been forgiven by the Emperor after the fall of Caliban. Thus, the Angels of Absolution do not consider themselves part of the Unforgiven despite being part of the second founding. However, this does not exclude them from hunting the fallen with the rest of the Dark Angels, and despite this opposing belief, the Dark Angels proper and the Angels of Absolution have been known to perform joint operations together. As you can imagine from a second founding chapter, the Angels of Absolution have quite the laundry list of accomplishments, so I'm just going to cherry pick some to talk about here. So during the Plague of Unbelief, the Angels of Absolution fought a rogue Cardinal Bucharest with a splinter empire on Galthamor, accompanied by the Executioners and some other chapters. There's the Siege of Vrax, which I'm not going to talk about because there's so many multiple-hour videos already on YouTube about this one, so that would be if you want to check it out, that go to a different channel. This is not the channel for it. But trust me, the Angels of Absolution were there. It's on their 40k wiki and everything. There's the Battle for the Caliban system, where a number of Unforgiven chapters united against the traitor fleet, consisting of Death Guard and the Fallen. While the Imperium, it was an Imperium victory, casualties were catastrophic, and an entire successor chapter was lost. And there was so much happening in this video, it again might be its own little fucking video one day. Also, I remembered a YouTube short I watched years ago. I'm pretty sure it said that the Angels of Absolution and the Tau were both they had neighboring planets that were their populace was infected by the Gellerpox or something like that, and obviously they couldn't go cleansing their own people. Well, the Tau could, and I don't know what excuse the Imperium had, but basically the Angels of Absolution and the Tau struck up a deal to letting them massacre each other's infected. That would politically nothing bad happen. But I don't have a source on that one, so you're gonna have to take that one with a grain of salt. Alright, next on the list is the Cald Wardens, which, much like the Iron Lords, you can remember their segment. Are dedicated to one Xenos species, so insignificant they don't even get a picture. The Cald Wardens call an asteroid belt named the Tears of Pyras their home. And they fight a Xenos called the Jahangir, the Jahangir. I'm gonna go with Jahangir. And that, like I said, I have no visual representation. But out of curiosity, I did Google Jahangir, and it took me to a wiki page. Excuse me. On a Sultan of Hindustan, which I'm not saying that this was deliberate or anything. I'm just saying that's one hell of a coincidence. So. However, the Cald Wardens also believe that there's a large fallen network in the area, which is supported by the fact that the Cald Wardens have... Breathe, motherfucker, goddamn. Sorry, I just woke up. So the Cald Wardens do think there's a network of fallen in the area, and this is supported by the fact that the Cald Wardens have an entire hollowed-out asteroid that they use as a prison for any captured fallen. These gentlemen are light on battle records and lore, as you can imagine, from them being in one asteroid belt their entire existence. But the chapter was visited by the lion after his catnap, which led to a decisive and final victory against the Jahangir, which makes me question if these Xenos even existed or if there was just a lie to keep the Cal Warden's true mission secret. Because it's not like the deception and secrecy are foreign to the Dark Angels or anything. All right, now we're going to move on to talking about the final successors of the Dark Angels, going to be the Bringers of Judgment. These Space Marines are quite the fanatical bunch with an extreme views of corporal punishment on for the... Hold on, my OBS is covering up my script. Give me a second. There you go. Where was I? Fanatical bunch with the extreme views of corporal punishment for the weakness of the minority, which the punishment is, of course, death, because it's 40k. What I'm trying to say is that these guys are more than a little genocidal. They've been known to kill entire planets over a local rebellion. And now for once the Inquisition does take an issue with this, and they do have a good point. However, nobody stops them. When the Celestial Lions complain too loudly, they get disappeared by the Inquisition. So, The Executioners are an Imperial Fist successor chapter from the Third Founding, made from quite the butcher of a man named Fafnir Ran in the wake of the Great Scouring. These steel-armored Space Marines are known for their extreme brutality. Remember when I said the Iron Talons were one of two chapters that wore human skin? In the picture for the Executioners on their wiki page, the dude's wearing a loincloth made out of flesh. However, despite their unbridled aggression, the Executioners are also quite the honorable chapter, holding blood oaths with other chapters. In fact, the Executioners were so loyal at one point to these blood debts that they joined Luft Huron during the Badab War against the Imperium. However, once the blood debt was paid, and because of some poorly handled hostage situations, the Executioners left the war early and were given a lighter penitent crusade than the rest of the Maelstrom Wardens. The Executioners have been known for their many sagas and quests, but somewhat recently they've inhabited a pair of planets of fire and ice, orbiting a dying sun, and the description of their fortress monastery is so badass, I'm just going to quote the wiki on this one. The chapter's fortress monastery was a huge armored asteroid base known as the Draken Vault, or the Darken Vault, which is gravitationally trapped in the Lagrange point between these two worlds. I would also like to talk about the accolades of all these blue steel killing machines, but they have an entire laundry list of battles they were in, so I'm just going to move to the next chapter. Alright, if you're an Imperial Fist fan or an old head of Warhammer, you're probably upset I didn't mention these guys first. But the Crimson Fists are possibly one of the most popular second founding chapters in the 40k universe. I mean, these guys were the poster boys until the Ultramarines took over. And they kind of shared the spotlight with the Black Templars for a while. But let's just take a moment to honor the Crimson Fist's history. It all began after the Iron Cage, a battle against the Iron Warriors and Imperial Fists, in which Dorn reluctantly agreed to the terms of the Codex Astartes, making the Black Templars and the Crimson Fists. The Crimson Fists were made of a bunch of fresh faces for the most part, with the exception of the leadership, which were big names such as Alexis Pollux, their first chapter master. From their beginning to the recent years of 40k, the Crimson Fists defended and defeated the Imperium's name galaxy-wide, but mostly played around the low-key sector where they were eventually gifted a planet in the sector. These planets also happen to see a lot of action with the Greenskin, so I guess old habits die hard for these Space Marines. The Crimson Fists were avid participants in the War of the Beasts, Battle of the Steel Cross, Declides Crusade, Battle of Rin's World, and the Revenge of Rin's World, which were only a few of the engagements that they have that were against orcs. The Crimson Fists have quite a few battle records engaging with the Eldar as well, including Eldar Exodites, which are barely touched since they're mentioning in Rogue Trader, so it's really interesting that the Crimson Fist got a whole campaign against them. It also partook in the Zeiss campaign against the Tau with other chapters such as the Night Watch, if you remember that one throwback to our paint and play, the one paint and play we ever did. There was also the assault on Blackreach against the Orcs, where the Crimson Fist got an entire box along with the Orcs, similar to like the Dark Imperium box that most people are probably familiar with nowadays. But it's cooler because they're not Ultramarines. Also, that box is from like 3rd edition or some shit, so you know, I like history like that, so gotta put some respect on the Crimson Fist's name. They walked so the Ultramarines could fucking get youngest child treatment and be spoiled brats. The last Imperial Fist successor is the Subjugators. More mean green killing machines for a knack for immense bloodshed, if you can remember all the way back to the Iron Hand segment. The Subjugators are another chapter in the Astartes Praeses organization, guarding the Eye of Terror against whatever crawls, slithers, or scamples out of that gate. The Subjugators are known for extreme measures. Their zeal is often likened to that of the Black Templars, which is just fucking bananas, especially considering that they were only founded in the 23rd or 24th founding. These Space Marines are so zealous, in fact, that their home planet was put in, like, right next to Terra, somewhere near there, so they could be used as, like, an outpost, where if anything comes from the Eye of Terror for, you know, Holy Terror itself, they can, they're like their last bastion before they actually get to, Terra, and then we have to do a whole Horus Heresy Part 2. Most of the Subjugators' lore is in the 13th Black Crusade, but outside of that, the Subjugators were seen in other conflicts, such as the Second Ebonian Genocide, where they spent a decade in the Ebonian sector, along with other chapters like the War Bearers, not to be confused with the Word Bearers, and the Order of the Blue Robe, not to be confused with the Order of the Black Sepulchre, which were also there. The Subjugators also fought both Chaos and Tyranids in 2 different wars over the Jericho Reach area. And as I touched on earlier, the Subjugators are known so much for being so overkill that I just took this quote straight from the wiki. Their methods are uncompromising and savage, often resulting in not only the destruction of the enemy's troops, but the total elimination of their non-combat assets, ensuring that the foe will not return to threaten the Imperium again. When called upon to reconquer worlds captured by the enemy, the Subjugators have more often taken such extreme methods that nothing of the worlds themselves remains to be liberated, and because of this, only the most desperate Imperial commanders request their aid against an invader. So yeah, they are so violent on the battlefield that some people don't even want to call them in as allies. Even your allies are scared of you. That's not even, yeah. That's why you can imagine why these guys were told to sit in one spot and guard Cadia. Now the Salamanders are going to be a tough one, and for once it isn't just for the lack of diversity within the successor chapters. You see, after the Horus Heresy, Guilliman wrote the Codex Astartes outlining that a chapter can only have a maximum of 1,000 Space Marines. Unless you're an Ultramarine, of course. However, this became a problem for the Salamanders because their remaining numbers after the Heresy could barely fill out 7 companies, let alone successor chapters. However, through hell or high water, the show must go on when it comes to successor chapters. And speaking of high water, let's talk about the Dark Krakens. The Dark Krakens are from the Ultima Founding, so like the Necropolis Hawks and the Wolf Spears, they're going to be a little bit lighter on the lore. However, these guys, I'm going to be real with you, they had a surprisingly decent chunk on the wiki page, so we're going to get through that. The Dark Krakens come from an oceanic world stricken in night, which is with plenty of dangerous megafauna that their native population learned to hunt. Due to this, the dark krakens have learned a culture of hunting the biggest and baddest of foes, such as, I don't know, dude. There's so much big shit in Warhammer. Name something. It's probably bigger than a Space Marine. They'll thrive. But let's zoom out from the Dark Krakens in general and go to the Third Tyrannic War, where a Inquisitor that I did not write the name of down lured a small splinter or tendril of Hive Fleet Leviathan to a section of space occupied by orcs, hypothesizing that the two parties would kill each other and then he could just waltz in and plant the Imperial flag. Or does the Imperium have a flag, or do they just carry around big eagle statues? However, the aliens that literally breed on violence and the aliens that genetically modify themselves to take the strengths of their food ended up in 40K's weirdest symbiotic relationship, as the orcs grew both in size and number, and the Tyranids becoming more lethal with all the orcs they kept eating. Now, as you can imagine, this situation would be both horrible, but a target-rich environment for the average person. And considering that now everything is massive in this area, the Dark Krakens would call it a buffet of glory. When the fighting inevitably spilled over to the surrounding area, many forces sought to stop it, such as the Death Watch and... the Wolf Spears are here. Alright, anyways. The Dark Krakens fortified basically all the worlds that were part of, or impacted directly by the Tyranid outbreak, as they were pretty much the entire second wave of reinforcements moving to secure this threat, or contain this threat. So most of the lore surrounding the Dark Kraken's involvement on the planet is named Death of Byanzir. That's where most of the engagement of this outbreak occurred, where the Wolf Spears and local forces trapped a bunch of Tyranids inside of the oceans, so, you know, kind of fate telling them to do their thing here. And, you know, as you can imagine, the Tyranids managed to, just keep on living, despite being thrown into freezing waters. And while the Wolf Spears cleaned up around the equator, the Dark Kraken scoured the sea floor for any remaining Tyranids, along with recovering some Prometheum rigs that were on the sea floor. And these forces that the Dark Krakens did include a Tech Marine. However, these rigs were cut off from the surface by a tsunami that the Wolf Spears may or may not have indirectly caused. Granted, I'm abbreviating a good amount of this, so if it does interest you, please go check out some source. I just found this on the wiki, so, yeah. I don't know. But it's the one documented battle of the Dark Krakens. I'm going to talk a little bit about why I like them. So, in the visuals, I've made their pauldrons blue because I don't have the DLC for purple paint in Warhammer Space Marine game. But yeah, their pauldrons are purple, which I really like because it's not a very common color you see in the Space Marine lineup, outside of like the Cal Wardens and the Soul Drinkers. Those are the only two that come to my mind, at least. Well, that and there's the Emperor's Hand. Anyways, without further ado, let's get into the next chapter. The next chapter is the Storm Giants, which I'm sure you heard me complain about in the White Scar segment, because you definitely watch all of my videos, right? But let's not go into that tangent again. However, unlike the Storm Lords, the Storm Giants have almost no lore. The only recorded anything about them are 2 campaigns, and the fact that they are larger and stronger than even the average Space Marine, and that they refuse to let their gene seed be examined. So yeah, that's all that is there for them. But let's get into those 2 campaigns because that's kind of all we have. So the first one is the Storm Giants sent 5 companies to aid in the Third War of Armageddon, which is kind of a big deal, big war. That's its own video again, if I ever end up doing like lore videos like that. The other engagement saw their first company, along with some random tactical squads and Vindicator tanks, all of the Storm Giants, of course, team up with the Black Templars to hold the second purging of Lestrade, where a purity cult named the Divine Army fell to Khorne. That's literally all they have, so I don't know. That's what we're going to talk about. The Dragon Spears are our final Salamander and the another Ultima founding successor with, again, a little light on the lore, and there wasn't as much talked about with their lore like there was with the Dark Krakens. But basically, the Dragon Spears are salamanders that spent a little too much time with a drunk uncle and became honorary space wolves. All jokes aside, these sons of Vulcan have made a name for themselves around the space wolves due to digging in with the Fenrisian forces during the Great War against Gazgul Thraka, I guess hold the Maguruk, where most of their history was made. I'm going to be real with you. That's like 90% of their wiki page is just that one sentence right there. The other thing that they talked about in the Dragon Spears wiki page is the campaign credited to the Dragon Spears is the Prosperin Rift War, where Magnus the Red invaded Imperial space to make his own empire that will be a safe haven for all Psychers. Honestly, that is a common Thousand Sons W right there. Look at him. He has his soul shattered into a million pieces, still out here being a G like that. But the outcome of this engagement was never stated, and it didn't have its own wiki page. But the Dragon Spears put 8 companies into the war, so I would assume at least some progress was made. I don't know, maybe they lost because the Ultramarines weren't fucking there.